You don't even have to put in the work to learn the accents.
Right.
You could just have AI do it. Is that Academy Award winning?
This is giving like a middle-aged man's idea of like what is a cutting-edge product.
Tech people are struggling to realize that they are like the new banks. They're the new like railroad barons.
Yo everyone, welcome back. Brand new Techish in the building. It is me, Michael Berhane, and I am back this week again with Dom from TechCrunch. How you doing, Dom?
Hello. Thanks for having me again.
No, you're more than welcome to join us. Yeah, Abba's chilling, but we'll get down to business straight away. I think we're going to talk about all things AI again. Everyone's really clamoring for like AI news and like what's going on and will my career still be here next week? But first things first, before I get into like careers in AI, there was a little news story about Vogue magazine that you were telling me about as well. Like what's happening with Vogue magazine and how does that intersect with AI?
Basically, Vogue, maybe like a week ago or something, they ran an ad. It was an ad from Guess, which Guess is big in the UK too, is it?
Kind of, yeah.
Everyone knows Guess. Oh, yeah, it's Guess.
Yeah.
And so Guess ran a fashion ad in Vogue, and the ad had AI generated models. Like it was just an AI model. And she was, really pretty. She was blonde. She was just modeling the clothes. But people were really talking about, oh my gosh, like Vogue put this in. Like, what does it mean that Vogue did this? And so it had this whole discussion for days of like, what does it mean? And so me and my colleague at TechCrunch kind of looked into it. And it was just, it was, I don't know what it means that Vogue did this. We reached out to Vogue, and Vogue said it didn't break their advertising, standards or anything. Like it was fine to put in the magazine. But I guess people are wondering like if Vogue has now co-signed on this, does this mean that we can just use AI models all the time? Like will all the big brands using it? We spoke to
Yeah.
some experts, and some experts who work with big luxury brands were saying that a lot of them were secretly trying to figure out how to use them or experimenting with it, but obviously they're not coming out and saying it. A lot of middle mass market brands, experts said that those were the most likely to use AI generated models because it's just so expensive to work with people in general. Like to get like all the shoots, all the photographers, the clothes, it's just so much cheaper to just digitize a person and put the clothes on. And so it seems like this is definitely going to shake up the fashion industry because it's like, why would you fly a model in from Paris when you can just digitize her? You can even like just create your face as an avatar and just sell your face to a brand to use it. And that could be a new side hustle. Like there's so many things that now people are looking at. And I do think that this is probably going to shake up fashion.
Yeah, I guess what Vogue represents is it's a tentpole in culture, right? It's one of those institutions that matter to people, even if they themselves don't necessarily read it anymore or purchase a magazine. It's a brand that has a lot of cachet, and I guess you can just about accept if some little tiny e-commerce brand uses AI models in their e-commerce website. But then when there's a cosign from an institution like Vogue, it now feels like, okay, well, let the floodgates get open, right? And what's next? Hollywood. Hollywood has toyed a little bit with kind of using certain AI prompts or whatever for like the CGI or whatever, and there's been a bit of backlash. But eventually, that too will probably cave as well once there is a massive motion picture that just pushes through and says, you know what, we had to use it because we had limited budget or we wanted to save money on X, Y, Z. So yeah, that's interesting. I think it's a sign of things to come.
Yeah, I think per the Hollywood thing, it's really interesting. I think the Brutalists got caught, or not got caught, but like they used AI. And I was reading how it was like during the campaign season. So I think someone told the publications this to try and smear the Brutalists, saying like, well, they're using AI. It sounded like a hit piece campaign. But they used it to, I think, smooth out some of the accents because they were speaking Hungarian.
Yeah, so in the film, the Brutalist AI was used to subtly enhance the Hungarian dialogue of the lead actors Adrian Brody and Felicity Jones. The technology involved was a Ukrainian company that specializes in voice AI to refine the pronunciations of specific sounds and letters. Ironically, I just read that from an AI snippet on Google as well, so that's funny too.
Is that okay if movies can do that? Because now it's like you don't even have to put in the work to learn the accents,
Right.
You could just have AI do it. Is that Academy Award winning? If you
Absolutely.
didn't
What happens when an actor is nominated for a performance and there was AI adjustments to their performance? What does that mean? Like, is that any different than from CGI when Tom Cruise does a stunt and it's not really Tom Cruise? I mean, Tom Cruise does a stunt, but let's say Will Smith jumps off a building and there's CGI, in that stunt. Does that mean he did less of a performance? I don't know. This is where we're going to get into contentious ground of what is art and what is not art, and where is that line? And I think those of us who are born, prior to the advent of large language models and, advanced AI systems are going to view it one way, and those who are born into this world are going to just see it as part of the parcel, right? you mentioned with the fashion world, eventually you will get a model like a Kate Moss or a David Gandy or whoever's the prominent models now, I don't know, that will probably license their image and say, listen, I've now established myself as a brand. Go and put me in 1,000 magazines all around the world or 1,000 e-commerce brands all around the world, even though I'm not there and I get pennies on a dollar. Or, use my voice to read audiobooks, even though I didn't read this book. And I think in 10 years' time, people who are born in that world will see that as a completely normal thing. I mean, that's not even unfortunately. I think as long as kind of creatives are getting paid somehow, I'm not going to lose sleep. But I do think there's going to be a lot of pain where some people will lose opportunities and some people will be hurt by that. And there will be, roles that will just disappear whole cloth. I don't know. What do you think? Do you think this now takes away from art? If I, as an actor now, theoretically, not me, but, an actor tweaks their voice, it's not really me doing certain things, but it is me. Like, how do you feel about art in that way being compromised?
No. It's so interesting. I mean, like, when you said tweaking the voice, I think of auto-tune
Yeah.
as
Is that
well.
really singing? People won Grammys on auto-tune songs. Do
They
you know what I'm saying?
did.
Yeah. So
Like,
it's
just
like,
become the
okay.
aesthetic of some people.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's just gonna be such a jarring transition. It's gonna be one of those things where it's like we look back and we're gonna say like, well, actors and actresses, they used to have to, train themselves to do these accents and they don't have to do it anymore. Or,
Yeah.
with this, it's like, yeah, when I was a kid, we used to have to fly models from all over the world to New York City. But scheduling got hard and the costs got high and there's tariffs. And so now we just generate them. I don't know what that means. And I know that when we were talking to the models, some of the models, one of them was like, this is really going to impact diverse models
Mm.
because brands are now just going to generate them rather than actually try to work with them. Is this art? I don't know. I can't give
We'll
a
leave it to the audience. Yeah. We'll leave it to the audience. Like, how would you feel if a movie you're watching is heavily shaped by the performances and they're using AI, and or you're reading Vogue magazine or some kind of magazine, then it's AI models. Is it going to stop you from purchasing certain products? Let's see. We'll leave it
I don't
to
know. I
Techish
mean,
Homie's thing.
I guess, well, I don't even know if this is the same thing, but remember when they used to hand draw animation
Yeah.
and now they don't? Well, I mean, like, there's some people who do, but like, it's just so hard. It's such a tedious thing,
But then
right?
it's a different process, but it's still animators involved. It's
Yeah.
very different where maybe I've got a script and I just go into AI and say, yo, make this script into an animated feature for me. And I'm not using any artists whatsoever. That's a whole different
Yeah.
dynamic, really, isn't it?
I think, yeah. Cause now it's going to be like, does the award go to the engineers who built the
Right.
product? I think
Exactly.
Didn't Amazon just buy a film studio that was where you can put in like your script and it will animate it for you? Did
I
you see
don't
that?
recall, but I can tell you that I've had conversations with people at different platforms. I won't say which ones, and their role is essentially looking at AI and how AI can be implemented into creating kind of major content for like major motion pictures. And they've told me to keep it under hush hush and whatever because it probably would generate a lot of backlash. So it wouldn't surprise me if Amazon has made that acquisition and is going to kind of roll that out.
Yeah, they invested in a company that lets you type in a few words to create scenes or entire episodes of a TV show, either from scratch or based on existing story worlds someone else has created. This is from Variety.
Yikes. Yikes. Yeah, so I guess let's stick with AI for now. So I saw an article talking about what Vinod Khosla says. So Vinod Khosla is a billionaire investor. He's one of the most prominent VCs in the US, co-founder of Sun Microsystems, which is a super old school company. And he was asking in an interview, like, what career advice do you give to like young people essentially? And you got to listen out for what these people are going to say because they are incentivized to make sure that as an investor, he makes money in all of his kind of AI investments. And at the same time, he doesn't necessarily like rock the boat and scare people too much. He doesn't want to scare the masses. But even still, what he said, I still found kind of concerning. He essentially said you've got to ditch the idea of a fixed career. That this whole concept of you having one career throughout your life, we've kind of have let go of that slightly. This whole idea of at 16, you enter a factory and you walk out of there retired at 60. That's kind of gone. But in terms of what your actual occupation was, you might have been a doctor, a writer, software engineer, and that might have carried you for 20, 25 years. And he's basically arguing that so much disruption is coming that the biggest skill set to have essentially is kind of like mental flexibility and the ability to kind of pick up new skills and kind of roll with it and go with the flow. And I don't necessarily think that's necessarily inherently bad, but I do think like Vinod, we're tired. You know what I'm saying? Vinod, like, I don't know. I don't know what you expect of everyone. Like most people, I don't think are built out for that kind of inherent uncertainty and that inherent
It's gonna
need
be
to
hard.
constantly have to kind of reinvent yourself every so often. And ironically, people used to have this whole like learn to code thing. They would go to like coal miners and people that were probably working with their hands and say, well, sucks for you that the economy's moved on, learn to code. And now, ironically, it's probably the reverse, where you're going to people who have worked in white collar work, in tech adjacent roles, in tech as software engineers, and you're now like, yo, learn to be a tradesman, figure it out. And the irony on that, that's kind of ironic, right? Just how quickly things change in the space of 2 to 3 years, maybe even 5 years.
I know. It's so much of a mental thing. And I feel like the next generation will probably be able to do this easier because they're going to grow up with they're going to grow up with the idea that, yeah, of course you just have to be flexible and all these things. But for our generation, even the millennials, they were told, like, if you get these degrees, you're going to get this job and you're going to be safe.
Yeah.
Even a few years ago, the cushy tech job was a whole thing for a really long time. And now all of a sudden you're like, oh, well, these computer science skills, AI could easily do. So you just got to figure something else out now. And it's going to be like that for the next 50, 60 years of your life because you're never going to retire. Like, that's definitely, I don't know, it's kind of heartbreaking, actually. Like, I don't
Yeah, I
know.
mean, when does it get to the point where kind of like the social contract is broken down? So, you got a lot of people with student debt who were told one thing about what those degrees would get them. Now you're coming to them and saying, okay, fair enough, you won't have that one job for life, but now you necessarily are going to have to shift careers constantly, maybe every 2 to 3 years, while still carrying that level of debt. And there's not a moment where you can take your eye off the ball. Like, that's a whole different paradigm that we're going to be entering into. And I don't think the political establishment is ready for what happens when you have a populace that is that disturbed, not disturbed, but that has that much economic unease that they can't
Yeah.
tell you what they're going to be doing in the next 5 years. Shit's already precarious. You're renting, you don't know how much your rent's going to be up next year, right? You're never going to buy a house. Maybe you're still living at home with your parents, who knows? And then now there's this where it's like, okay, do a training course every 3-4 years. I'm not buying it. And I think every bit of data has shown that most people are not really good at reskilling, and reskilling training doesn't necessarily even tend to work. I know that sounds really dark, but when they have looked at this whole learn to code thing, can you get coal miners to code? Every bit of data showed that it couldn't work. Maybe that's too much of a leap, but I think there's something to it. I think people want to get comfortable. I don't think you're going to have people over a 10-year period switch careers 4 times. Like, I don't know. That's just my perspective.
Yeah, it's definitely going to exacerbate some of the issues that social, economic, political issues we're already having. Where, I mean, who can afford to just be shaken up like that every 4 to 5 years? That means that it's not just new skills; it's also maybe a new salary. That's no guarantee of a salary bump. And
Yeah.
if you're renting and rent keeps going high, what if you decide to have a family? Oh, I don't know, because in 2 years I might not have this income that I've had. It's going to shake up the entire social fabric, and that is going to have repercussions that I don't think the political establishment is ready for. Because at what point do people
100%.
just get tired? People just get tired, and they're just
Yeah.
gonna. We know what happens when people get tired. People
Who do
get
they
tired.
vote for? You know what I'm saying? Who do they vote for? And I think one of my concerns is, I think what we have, like, obviously US has got Trump, and I think UK Farage is kind of in the background, kind of waiting.
He's
And
waiting.
yeah, he's waiting. And when people vote for people who are far right, right wing, demagogues or whatever, and they still don't get change, it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to switch back and say, we're going to go super left wing now. It can actually mean that, like,
It
some
gets
of the
nasty.
darkest points of human history, people have gone further and further, to fascistic people, because they're like, well, if these guys can't do it, then I need somebody who's outside of all, current political politeness to talk about. And that scares the shit out of me, to be
Yeah,
honest with you.
people get nasty.
People get nasty. Okay, other story let's talk about on a completely different topic is Figma. So Figma has just IPO'd.
Oh
If you don't
yeah,
know, it's a powerful collaborative design tool, and a lot of startups use it kind of to mock up products and whatever. And there's been a few controversies regarding their IPO. So one is that it was priced relatively quite cheaply. So it went public at $33 a share, and it popped to 120 back down to 100. Now that sounds great, but what actually happens when companies IPO is that shares are offered beforehand, before they go to retail, to like essentially preferred clients like institutions, pension funds, banks, whatever, and they get access to those $33 shares before the public does. So essentially, if you got in then, you essentially made a bunch of money on that IPO pop. That if you're retail like me, who wants to just get involved, who hasn't got access to the banks and can't get special connections, I've now got to pay that $100 a share because I probably came in a bit too late, right? So there's an argument there that it's kind of just out on the open corruption, and that if you are in the know, if you have the right friends, if you've got the right connections, you can essentially make money straight away with very little work and lift. And I'm going to say that I feel like obviously that is unfair, but I'm also going to say that I never really expect the world to be fair. And I think it's still relatively like, still, if I was interested in buying Figma, I still would buy it if I thought this price was fair. But I don't know. Like, are
Well,
you?
I mean, that's just how it goes. I mean, it's the same as when I see people on the internet who are like, "Oh my gosh, like you can just invest your way to generational wealth." And I'm like, you like I see this one statistic that's like, "Well, if you would have invested in Facebook or Meta when it was this price, blah blah blah, then you would be this." And I'm like, "No, because you had to get it before it went public. You had to just know the
Yeah.
right people and invest in it before it IPO'd. Like you just had to have that network in general to get in early or series A, B, and C. And you were never gonna make $1 billion off of investing on it on the IPO market. You always needed that network to get ahead.
So I do think there is something about investing. I will never say to people don't
Oh
invest,
yeah,
and I
yeah,
do think,
invest. But
yeah,
people
right. But what I will say is, yes, you could have bought Meta even like 5 years ago when it was down, and then it's come back up. You could have made a decent amount of money, right? But that probably would have been based on an understanding of the market, research, your own due diligence, and figuring out that okay, there's still an opportunity here, right? But what these people do is they just make money based purely on their connections, and they know
yeah,
for a fact that there's going to be a pop the next day, and they can just cash out straight away. So there's a
yeah,
difference between saying, okay, if you've done your homework, done your due diligence, worked hard, figured out what stock was down and could go up over the next few years. That's obviously one category, which is difficult for the average person to even really do all that work. But you could theoretically have done it. Then there's, okay, I know the right people at, JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs, and they got me in and got me an allocation, and we knew it was going to pop the next day, and we just cashed out. And I think that's
yeah.
two different categories of like, unfairness, and two different categories of where the world works for those in the know and it doesn't work for those of us who are not in the know, right?
That's how it works.
That's how it goes, right? The other thing that's interesting, and it stirred a bit of controversy and debate on tech Twitter, is the fact that Adobe was about to purchase Figma a couple years ago. Now, we all know Photoshop. Adobe owns probably most of the market when it comes to like creative design. They own XD, Illustrator, Photoshop. I think they own like 60, 70, 80% of that market. Whereas Figma owns the vast majority of kind of like product UI design. So if Adobe came in and had been able to buy Figma, they pretty much would have had the whole kind of market to themselves, right? And I know people who use Adobe Photoshop, they hate it because A, it's very difficult to cancel. They have a lot of dark pattern design when it comes to time to like, I want to cancel my subscription or I'm not happy about this. And they continually charge you, right? So they are known for being very scrupulous. And that tends to happen when you have a monopoly in a sector.
A
So
monopoly.
Lina Khan, who was the chairman of the FTC at the time, she blocked it. She said this is an antitrust move. It shouldn't be possible that one company can own both of these, can purchase Figma and essentially completely corner the market. Now that this didn't happen and they had to pay $1 billion breakup fee, obviously now Figma's gone public and it's 4 times the valuation that it once that Adobe offered to buy it. So Lina Khan came out and tweeted and said, "Hey guys, look, I was right. It was better for them to be by themselves. It was better for the market. It's better for shareholder value. People can now purchase the stock if they want, and the market is more competitive." Oh my lord! Under that tweet, I saw everyone in tech. Paul Graham. Oh, you can't say
These
that.
people are so
Jason
ridiculous.
Calacanis, every
Of
single
course.
major tech VC person was like, "Oh, that is like hindsight bias. There's been so many startups that have died because you wouldn't let them be purchased. This just worked out. This happened to work out this time. It shouldn't be up to you to decide. It shouldn't be up to unelected bureaucrats to decide what companies can be acquired and who
True.
can't and whatever, whatever." And I just gotta say, like, I think they kind of give away the game there, where they don't believe that it is possible for there to be an unethical monopoly based
Well,
out of purely market forces. So
tech people are struggling to realize that they are like the new banks. Like this
yeah,
is like they are the new like railroad barons. Like you cannot have ideally monopolies are illegal. You cannot
yeah,
have them. Like they're struggling to realize like you are the new big entity that the government is looking to regulate, just like it's always regulated every mass industry that's always popped up or
yeah. I
tried.
mean, if you spend enough time in like the dregs of the podcast world and listen to like what tech VCs tend to think, most of them are super libertarian, and they genuinely believe that a monopoly is only possible if the government grants a monopolistic right to a company, and that essentially within the free market, all monopolies eventually will collapse. So in their mind, they're like, well, it doesn't matter if Adobe and Figma own 90% of the market. In capitalism, eventually that will be eroded, which I don't necessarily agree with. I don't think that is the case. I think that's completely ideological. The other thing is, a lot of VCs have their shitty investments protected. And the Magnificent Seven, Google, Meta, whatever, come in and just acquire their startups.
Yeah.
So when the acquisition market kind of freezes up, because Lena Khan is saying, well, actually, let's take a look and see, is this helpful for the market? Is this helpful for consumers? that then slows down their crappy startup investments getting rescued. And there's been a lot of startup
Funny.
founders who are basically going to go broke. The startup's not going to work. And then, someone in the Mag 7, Google, Meta, whatever, comes in and rescues them and says, okay, we'll give you a couple $1 million. We'll, bail out your investors. You get something. Everyone wins, right? So that is why Lina Khan is so hated, because that's how the whole ecosystem works. I'm not necessarily saying they're wrong. I get it. As a founder, would I like to be backed out and helped out and be acquired by a big tech company just when I'm about to go bust? Okay, cool. Like, maybe that's how the ecosystem works. But let's not pretend that this wasn't the correct decision. In the end, she was completely validated.
I think so too. I think she was validated in the end.
Yeah, 100%. You wanted to have a say about Apple. So in previous
I
episodes,
don't know.
I have cussed out Apple, and you want to join in cussing out Apple. So what's
Well,
your perspective on Apple as a company right now? Not good? Good?
it's only
How you
because
feeling about them?
I had to cover their earnings last week, and every time like Apple listed, we all ever like they were talking about how they sold their 3 billionth iPhone or something like
Damn.
that. They were also I've been covering a bit of Apple because they've been getting really hit hard with these tariffs. They said that already. I think tariffs have cost them about 800 million, and they're expecting 1.1 billion next quarter of like tariff costs. Like
Damn.
they're obviously going through it, but I don't know. Like I think I'm just more so just when I cover a lot of tech news, I'm covering even Google is trying. Everyone is, Meta is obviously out here really trying OpenAI. You hear about all the efforts people are making, and Apple's making efforts, but it's just like they are not in the conversation of being that girl in AI. And
100%.
it made me maybe it's time to reassess who's leading Apple. Maybe it's time for some new blood to come in there to bring new, fresh ideas, especially if they want to be a leader in AI. Tim did a great job. He did a great job this past decade. But maybe it's time for someone else to come in. I don't know. I've been thinking about it for a while.
I think you're right. I think I'm looking at their stock and they're down from the last year. They're down 5% from last year. For a regular company, that's not the end of the world. But for Apple, that's a big deal. Obviously, that's a combination of tariffs, like you mentioned. That's going to affect them heavily. But yeah, it's also a general pessimism around their AI prospects and their capability of producing something good in AI. They've obviously had like partnerships with OpenAI announced, and nothing came of that.
It's like,
They
why?
started releasing like these white papers, basically saying that large language models are pretty stupid and they're not actually that smart. And I think that was their way of saying, we investigated ChatGPT and all these different models. We thought about replacing Siri, and we realized that it's not clever enough yet to unleash it to 1 billion consumers worldwide, as far as they're concerned, in terms of like that kind of Apple standard of perfection. Because you will interact with a large language model, and if you ask it some crazy question, it will give you a crazy answer. And does Apple want their brand associated with that right now, where like a little
No.
kid's opening up the iPhone and it's like, mommy, daddy, like the iPhone told me that, something crazy, right? Because ChatGPT will just say a madness sometimes. If
Yeah,
you
they're
so,
causing
so
people to do hallucinations and stuff.
yeah, exactly right. They don't want to run the risk of these hallucinations being attached to the Apple brand. But as Google found out, you got to just dive in, because Google tried to do the same thing as well, right? Where like they didn't release their large language model until ChatGPT started cooking. And apparently behind the scenes, Google already had something capable like Gemini years ago, but they didn't want to release it because it hallucinates. It wasn't ready. But when they saw ChatGPT, they panicked and put it out to the market. And is it perfect? No, but at least they've got something out into the market. And I think maybe, like you said, Tim's not the guy for it. And I've heard another theory that maybe the management team is just too old. It's pretty much the same kind of faces that I've been seeing over the last kind of like 5 to 10 years. And is it possible that you get to a level in your career where you just cannot consistently ride out every single new technology wave, where you just are not the guy anymore? You are not the person to go from iPod to iPhone to iPad to now large language models 30, 25 years later. I don't know. That might be something to it. I'm not trying to be
Yeah.
ageist, but I
No,
think they probably do need some new blood.
I feel like I feel like it's valid to bring up. Like maybe maybe it's I don't know. Like
It's
I
over.
definitely it's wait. There was also something. Oh yeah, I actually had another thought. Maybe this is all part of the plan.
Oh,
Like
okay.
and Apple is like they're just slow and steady. And they're just waiting for the AI bubble to burst, because then they can just say, well, glad we didn't spend $100 billion on that. And
Yeah.
then keep selling us iPhones. But I
Yeah, I
just don't.
mean that was the theory when DeepSeek, the Chinese AI model, came out, and they were able to replicate what Llama could do, what ChatGPT could do, relatively quite cheaply, just by cloning those models or working backwards from those models. People were like, "Oh, that's a great sign for Apple, because Apple can therefore build and just get a cheap model like a DeepSeek later on down the line. They're not going to have to invest $100 billion like all these other companies are." But I don't know, man. I want to see some activity. I wouldn't say it's time to sell Apple if you own the shares, but I would say that I wouldn't go in there and be like, it's time to buy a whole bunch of stock. No financial advice, obviously. I just mean I need to see more from them, and it's not looking good. And I think
Yeah. It seemed
when I
like they
contrast the ads that they had for the iPod, that sexy ad, this might be before your time, but I don't. Do you remember those iPod ads where like
Yes.
people in black it'll be, and then the color, and they'll be dancing? Yeah, I'm saying it was young as a vibrant brand. Now all the ads are about Gemoji, and the Apple Watch can now track your resting heart rate. I'm like, okay, this is good. People are healthy, but this is giving like a middle-aged man's idea of like what is a cutting edge product. I get it. You guys are all in your 60s and want to make sure that you can track your health. But like, come on, man, give me some sexiness back. I'm not seeing it as a sexy brand anymore.
Yeah, no, because what was their partnership with OpenAI? Because I remember reading it and saying, why would you need to partner with OpenAI? Why can't you just build your own technology?
Yeah, because it's I guess, an admittance that they're just far behind and they didn't have the capability of doing it in-house, or it would take too long, or, Apple is essentially not really a technology company anymore. It's a brand, it's a lifestyle brand, and that the hard, deep tech has to be outsourced from somebody else, somewhere else. And that, to be honest, is a concern. Because actually, if you look at Microsoft, you look at Google, you look at Apple, and you look at Facebook, only Google has built their own model. Microsoft has partnered with ChatGPT. Apple hasn't done nothing. Meta's got Llama, but they're struggling. They're trying to throw a bunch of money at it, and they're trying to get all these researchers to come join them. So maybe Google's the only one who's really caught up from the kind of the original FANG lineup. So I guess it's not easy.
Move fast and break things. Yeah, because like these big tech companies sometimes, like it was interesting with this AI race to see them realize that they were no longer the young, fast movers, and they were kind of these old, slow giants now. Maybe Apple's really good at hardware. Maybe they should make robots. Are they? I mean, I'm sure they are making like robots, but maybe they can like focus on.
Yeah, I don't think they've got it anymore. And what I want to see is what Johnny Ive does with Sam Altman at ChatGPT. So Johnny Ive, the legend. Yeah, it might be some. Go on.
That could have been a nice homecoming for Apple.
Yeah. Because if OpenAI with Johnny Ive releases some sort of consumer device that is AI first, I don't think Apple will be in any danger, but it will show that like they're slipping, and that why are they not on this cutting edge where they used to be. But anyways, cool. We'll leave that there. That's been this week's episode of Techish. Thank you once again, Dom, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Everyone go sub to the Black Cat, which is Dom's Substack newsletter, and watch and read her great reading on TechCrunch. And she's on the TechCrunch podcast as well sometimes, so check her out. And she's at Dominic-Madori. Did I get that correct?
Yeah, Dominic-Madori. Follow me on Instagram.
Cool. All right. Peace, everyone. Ciao. I think one last Patreon story. We're going to talk about the Online Safety Act. So back in 2023, under actually the Conservative government, there was an act that they wrote up, which was basically going to help protect young people from viewing illegal or harmful content. It's now been implemented into law under the Labour government, so both parties have kind of got their fingerprints on it. And it was implemented recently, and essentially now if you go to certain adult websites, they will now ask you, can you validate that you are an adult? It will send you to this third-party platform where you've got upload your ID or some sort of, technology, face access scan or whatever. And obviously it's led to a lot of controversy. To watch the full episode, subscribe at patreon.com/techish. You'll get access to all full-length episodes, no adverts, the chance to submit your questions into the show, and early bird discounted tickets to our live shows. Subscribe for as little as $5 a month.